Hi. That's a lot of people. I didn't expect so many people to show up. I will make a disclaimer at the beginning. This is my first presentation on such a big conference. I'm super intimidated, especially now that so many people showed up. So what we're... Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great start. So what we're going to do, I promise. I beg you to pretend not to be intimidating, and then I will pretend not to be intimidated, and then we're going to both look quite professional. So who am I and what this talk is going to be about? So my name is Kala. I'm a designer at 11-bit Studios. And for the past 3 years, I've been working on Frostpunk 3. I've done many things on the project, but like one big thing... Shit, there is no Frostpunk 3. Yes. See?
There is now.
There is now official... Yeah, no, nothing official. No, I'm so confused. See, I even don't know what game I was making. Anyway, what I was saying is that I did a lot of things during the development of Frostpunk 2, but the one thing that that I'm associated with, one big topic I was involved in was balance. So basically, you can say that I'm the number lady of Frostpunk 2, right? And now another disclaimer is that, of course, our team is big, so I, of course, wasn't the only person tweaking the numbers. So you can say that, you know, I'm the number lady of Frostpunk 2, but there are multiple number ladies in the project, and most of them are actually men. But now, very briefly about Frostpunk 2. See, I have the correct number here on the screen. I remembered when doing the presentation. Very briefly about the game. So for those who haven't played yet, Frostpunk 2 is a survival society city builder. So survival means it's hard and it's about resource management. I will see if my pointer works. Does it work? Can you see it? Yeah. Okay. So this is a screen. This is a screen from the game. You can see here at the top that you have multiple different resources. Here below that you have like black balls that signify the problems that you have in the city, which stem either from the lack of resources or from other factors. And here you can see it quite badly on this screen because it's all gray. But here you have icons that signify the communities in the city. And this is important. This is one big difference between Frostpunk 2 and Frostpunk 1, that now we are focusing more on the society part and of the people who live in the city. And these people have different opinions about what this city should be. So now I told you about my game. I'm going to ask a question to you. I want to learn something about you. Who in the audience is a game designer or acted in a capacity of game designer, like having multiple roles or something like that? Okay, that's a lot of people. Okay, who of you have ever balanced a game, or acted in a capacity of person balancing a game? Nice. That's quite a lot of people, but yeah, this is a talk about balance, so yeah, who knew? Now, one more difficult question. Okay, this is what Frostpunk 2 is. No, this is the wrong slide. Okay, what is balance? Anybody has a working definition or has any idea what balance is? Here. Do you have second mic? Yeah.
Well, the goal is to have as much meaningful decisions in the game as possible. So the balance is the art, basically, of tweaking those decisions so that every decision is viable and meaningful in its own way.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a definition of what balancing is. We can define it like this. Any other definitions? There in the back?
Well-designed and balanced is balance for me.
Yeah. Well-designed balance is a balance. Yes. Here in the front, like 2 more people. Here.
The sweet spot between fun and hard.
Between fun and hard, yeah. Okay. The sweet spot, okay.
So for me, it's tweaking the logical and math and parameters so they comply with the core design of the game and
Yeah.
the core fantasy.
Yeah. So we're trying basically to achieve with the numbers what we had in mind on paper and our fantasy. Yeah. Sure. So the problem, so we have heard different definitions. We have heard some definitions that are about balance, what balance is, and also some about what the act of balancing is. And I want to show you something. There is this book called Game Balance by Ian Schreiber and Brenda Romero. This is me. This is the book. Just not to confuse it. And this book is 700 pages about game balance and how to balance a game. And the first chapter is called "What is game balance?" And the answer they give is we don't know. We don't know. They are saying literally that game balance is first and foremost a feeling, and you know it when you feel it. Like, nice. This is like a super precise definition. And if you look at the sentence before, it says if you ask 100 game designers what game balance is, you get 90 different answers. Like, oh, now I got only 4 different answers, but if I ask all of you, like, I would probably get a lot more. So the problem with defining balance and what balance is that actually it defines really many different things. It's a bug of a term because we can balance choices, we can balance items between each other, we can balance difficulties, we can balance progression, we can balance the gameplay intensity, we can balance gameplay and narration if we want to have more this or that in the current moment. So it is very difficult to find a definition because it just describes so many different things. And now one common denominator in the act of balancing is that we are usually balancing 2 or different or more different things against one another, and this is why we even have this word, right? Balance on scales. It always has 2 arms. I cannot do 2 arms like this. Sorry. Yeah. So for the sake of this presentation, I will focus mainly on choice balance and difficulty balance because I have to focus on something. Otherwise, I would have to write a 700 pages long book, and I have only 45 minutes, now 35 left. So when we usually think of choices, we think about balancing one choice against the other choice, like that. This is... you can't really see the boxes that well. It's light here, but I think maybe it's gonna be all right. Okay, it's gonna be all right. So you're usually thinking about balancing one choice versus another choice. But another important factor that we have to have in mind here is that you are always balancing choices in regards to a game state, right? So in the situation that you have currently in the game. So a game state is basically like a set of properties. And these properties can describe different things. So these properties can describe the state of the world. So it can be like what resources do you have in the map, like how many of them you have, like what is the level in front of you, what is the challenge you are facing. But this can also be things pertaining to the player, like where are you exactly located, how fast you are, what abilities have you bought in the past, and what your current status is. And now these choices also have their own properties. And now the process of decision taking between these choices is basically it's basically assigning values to those properties and deciding which one of them is better. So these properties can be valued positively or can be valued negatively. So let's imagine that this is a choice between 2 different weapons. So we can see that choice 2 has 2 properties. One of them has +20, one of them has -7, because maybe it hits very hard, so that's a +20, and but maybe it poisons you every time you land a hit, so that's obviously negative. That's -7. And now I will be using this model of like talking about properties and assigning values in this presentation, and I will be basing a lot on Frostpunk 2, but just like as a disclaimer, these values will be made up. These will be not the exact values that we were using, or not even values that we were using in the process of the development. They are here only for the presentation purpose, and to like make sure that we know what relations are between them. And there are, like, some of you may know, some of you may have already done that. There are methods of balancing where you would actually translate every property into a core resource of the game. So we'd count everything in something like health points or mana or something like that. But this is not what we were doing in the process of Frostpunk 2. So let us talk about Frostpunk 2 then. In Frostpunk 2, I think I have mentioned, no, I forgot to mention, yes. So when I was talking about Frostpunk 2 and what Frostpunk 2 is, I forgot to mention that we have basically three main actions that the player takes. So they build infrastructure in form of districts and buildings, they do research, and they sign laws. And usually when signing laws, the player has some options to take. So they are signing one of two or more laws. And here let's look at an example of food additives, which is a law that is meant to address a problem of not having enough food. So let us look here. Let us define our game state as a small city with 10,000 people, 10,000 population, which is basically early game, very small city, and 25% food deficit, which means you are fulfilling your demand for food to 75%, but you're still missing some. And now, when player goes into the screen of signing laws, he has two options to choose from. So the first one is chemical additives, which means basically we are now gonna produce some additionally artificially manufactured additives to put them into our food to increase the volume of our food, right? So what this law does, it has three core properties. So first one is it gives you plus 15% of food production efficiency, which means like every structure that already produces food is gonna produce more food. Now, it requires some infrastructure. It stems from the first property, where here I assigned a 0 because basically everything requires infrastructure, so this is a baseline, and it increases disease. And it increases disease, which means some people are going to get sick, but this effect is quite marginal, so it's only -5. So we can evaluate this score as +20. Now, the other choice is foraged additives. And foraged additives means that from now on, people from the city are meant to go out of the city and gather some food for themselves, like roots or whatever, so that everybody provides for their own needs a bit, so the city itself has to produce less. So this choice has two main properties. So it gives you food in all cities, and it also does not require infrastructure, which is a cool thing. So I also added some points here. Now you can see that in this current game state, these laws seem quite unbalanced. So the chemical additives gives you +20, forage additives gives you +40. So it should be no-brainer to choose forage additives. To balance it, what we did to balance it out, we introduced additional rule. The rule is that when there is a whiteout in the city, and now a whiteout in Frostpunk 2 is basically a storm, is a weather that's gone mad, right? And it means that temperature drops. Temperature drops very harshly. You need to produce way more fuel, way more coal. You have to heat more, but also everything that is outside the city, it cut off. You basically cannot leave it because the conditions are too bad. Now, we introduced the rule that when a whiteout is in your city, this law just doesn't work. People cannot go out to gather food, right? But as you can see, I put it here and assigned 0. Why? Because I didn't change the game state. Because we don't have a whiteout, so this law, actually doesn't change. So it doesn't change anything, right? But when there is a whiteout in the city, suddenly this becomes minus 40 because now this law is basically useless. So now we can see how this game state changes the evaluation of these choices. Yes, of these choices. However, wait, no, I will drink some water and I will come back. Okay, that was dramatic water drinking. Okay, now, so at this point, I wanted to say that not if it was all about numbers. If it was only about absolute numbers in relation to the game state, all players would take the same decisions in particular game states of the game. But this is not true. Why is this not true? At this point, I would like to introduce the term of perceived balance. So I like to think about it that in the game we have balance and perceived balance. So balance itself are the values and the relationships between values and rules in the game as absolutes that exist in the game system. So the balance answers questions like, is X bigger than Y, or is X stronger than Y, or Z is only active when something, right? So this is actual balance. Whereas perceived balance is how the player evaluates these things. So these are the questions that he answers. Is X actually bigger than Y? Is it worth it? Now the process of decision taking is the process that takes place in player's head, where he actually assigns these values in their head. Now, when we looked at foraged additives again, at this law, we have some values assigned here, and these are the values that either exist in the system or that the values that the designer thinks are the closest to what is there in the system when the system is complex enough. However, the player may not evaluate it like that. The player could have said, okay, the player could have thought that the fact that this law gives food in all city is actually a 20, which would be worse than the effect of the main effect of chemical additives. Because when facing this choice, the player could have not realized that there are going to be multiple cities in the game. And it's the same with infrastructure. So I have, as a designer, assigned here a 10 because I know that infrastructure in Frostpunk 2 is prone to is just unreliable. So it can break. It also can be affected by some. It also can be affected by some events in the game, which makes it unusable. So actually, the fact that it does not require infrastructure is better. However, the player may not realize all these things when playing the game the first time, for example. So these values that the player is assigning, are basically informed by the values in the game, but modified by players' comprehension of the system. So just to wrap up of the numerical factors, and we will start building a model from now on. Numerical factors are basically two things. So these are rules. So what effects things have or choices have in the game, and under what conditions, and we have values, so how strong these effects are. So here we can start building our model. We can say that we always start with a game state, with a particular game state, which has a set of properties. Within that game state, we always have a choice. This choice is always somehow evaluated, but the choices that the player take are informed by their understanding. So there are numerical factors that are absolutes that exist in the game software. Here n signifies the sum of these factors, but these factors are modified by players' comprehension of the system. Now, water. Okay, but I promised you that this is going to be talk about not only numbers, and so far I'm talking only about numbers. Now let's do some talk about not numbers. So the other group of factors that we have to take into consideration are sentiment factors. So sentiment factors are how the player feels about the decision he's taking. Does the player feel this is the morally right decision? Does he feel good about taking this decision? Does he feel like shit about taking this decision? This is something that we find very, very important in 11-bit studios, and these are actually the factors that we start a lot of our balancing with. So I will show you an example here again. So in Frostpunk 2, we have charters, and charters are a special category of laws which are about basically dictatorship. So Frostpunk 2 is all about democracy. So now you cannot just go into your book of laws and sign whatever law you want. When you are proposing a law, people in your city have to vote on it, and they have to pass with a majority, right? Charters are a special category of laws that chip away at democracy and grant you extraordinary powers that basically extraordinary powers that make you more and more a dictator. So the starting law of charters is called guided voting, which allows the player basically to politely ask the people, the voters who are not really, who are hesitant, who are not really sure how they should vote, to convince them that they should vote in the direction that you want. And this is a powerful gameplay effect. The game is way easier with it. So I assigned it plus 60 here because it's a very strong effect. But we see that not all people are just, that not all people are signing this law like crazy, right? So there must be something else. There must be something else that diminishes this factor, right? And we also see that there are differences between how different players feel about this decision. So here I have assigned a range, which means that for some players this will be a very negative factor. For some players it will be neutral. But how do we know that we have ranges? How do we know that this is different between players? So we gather analytical data. Can we see? Yeah, I think we can see. Yeah. So basically, we gather analytical data from our players, and we know the locations from where this data came. And what we can see here on the screen is in how many % of playthroughs specific charter laws were signed. And an interesting thing here is that we can see that in Asia, people were way more likely to sign guided voting than they were in Europe. This is always over a 15% change. And this is actually, if you see here, actually you can see less when it's orange, but well, it looks better on my screen here. Well, you can see that this is the case. That this is the case for all charters. That all these laws that basically break your democracy are more likely to be signed in Asia. Now, so when we are looking at what sentiment factors are, we can definitely say that players' culture is one of the things that informs the player decision. Water break. So now I have an example from a different game. I have example from We the Revolution. Anybody here played We the Revolution? Okay, some people. Not so many, but some. Who do you play in We the Revolution as? Who are we role playing? Who knows of the people who raised hands? The judge, yes. So we are playing a judge during French Revolution. We're playing a judge during French Revolution, and how the gameplay looks is basically you have to interrogate a witness. You have to interrogate, of course, the defendant, and you have some case files that you go through. that you go through, and based on that, you have to sentence the person, and then you have three choices. Usually, you can guillotine him or her, you can put them into jail, or you can set them free. And now, if it was only that, we would have a game which has actually no numerical factors. And there are games with no numerical factors, like narrative novels being an example. Right? However, the game does has numerical factors. In the city, there are three groups of people. There are the aristocrats, there are the common folk, and there are the revolutionaries. And these three group of people like you or don't like you. If they don't like you enough, they're gonna assassinate you in your sleep or in the night or whatever. So these are basically three health bars that you have. Now, the problem with that is that all of these groups of people have an opinion about the sentences that you are making. So they expect you to take a specific decision in a specific case. They want you to take a specific decision in a specific case. And if you take a different decision, then they are not gonna like you. So in the entire game, you have to balance between taking decisions that you think as morally correct and taking decisions that will grant you, let's say, success in the game, because you don't want to lose, right? And now we have this case. We have this very strong case of Jean Ibert, who is accused of rape, and And now the evidence that we have, the evidence that the game presents us, the defense that the guy is presenting, and the witness all indicates that he did the thing. And the game is pushing you, or let's say the game makes you feel it's a correct decision to sentence him in one way or another. However, the problem is that this is a national hero. This is one of the conquerors of the Bastille, as you maybe can see on the screen, but it is quite small font. So basically, you feel like you should do this, but if you do, everybody is going to be angry, right? So now, how players are taking decision here is very dependent on the character, on the personal character of the player. So no, yes, okay. I got a bit lost in my presentation, but I'm back on track. So basically, we have these two choices. Sentence him, set him free. Sentence him has very low numerical factors, because it's gonna just make you trouble. It's gonna be very difficult to come back from the situation, because everybody's gonna hate you after you sentence him. Set him free is neutral, because it doesn't change your parameters in any way. However, the sentence him option has positive sentiment factors. So most people will feel good about taking the correct decision. Some not. It depends here on your moral compass. And then for set him free, this is the opposite. So most people will feel bad about releasing the man. And how people will take decision here in this case is dependent on the player's character. So in 11-bit, usually when we think about categories of players, we usually think about role players versus min-maxers. So role players will be people who would assign high sentimental values, who will take the decisions more based on how they feel about the decision, versus min-maxers would be people who disregard all these moral things, and they just act based on the numerical factors. So of course, for both groups, we have these two choices. The numerical factors will be the same for both of them. Let's assume here that their understanding of the system is the same and perfect and whatever. So this would be the same. For the role player, the sentiment factors will be pushed to pushed to the limits, and for the min-maxers, the sentiment factors will be at 0. So we can see here that the role player character is way more likely to sentence the person, whereas a min-maxer player will be more likely to set him free. Now, I will show here an example from Frostpunk 2. Let's come back actually to food additives. This is my favorite law. This is also the favorite law of our narrative team. We bring it up quite often. So when we come back here and we look at the split of how players were signing this law post-release, we can see here that forage additives was signed way more often than chemical additives. And now, for me, both of these laws are like. For me as a player, I don't assign high sentiment values to these laws. For me, they are both more or less the same. However, when we were talking with people before release, and also this was the feel in our team, is that chemical additives is kind of shady. It's like adding stuff to people's food, whereas forage additives is just going around gathering roots. Like, there is no problem with that. So people find chemical additives as people assign lower sentiment factors to the chemical additives law. So we were here. So among sentiment factors, we have culture, as we said earlier, but we also have player's character. Now, another dramatic water pause. Nice. So here another example from Frostpunk 2. So in Frostpunk 2, at some point you have the ability to introduce servitude. So servitude means that from now on, some people will serve other people, right, in the city, and it creates another community. It creates another community on your bar here at the bottom. The community of servants, and this community has two special actions. So the first special actions is basically increase the number of servants, turn more people in your city into servants of other people, and the other action is basically like abuse servants' work. So drive these servants to do more. To work in worse conditions, but to increase the city output. And we had this discussion with another number lady in our team, like which of these abilities is actually worse, because what we were doing here is, as I said, here in 11-bit we often assign the sentiment factors first, the sentiment values first, and then we think about numbers, and then like the number scales. So here, in this case, we were wondering like which of these abilities is actually worse, and which should have lower sentiment values. And I said for me, abusing the work of the people is worse, because worse is the like you are taking the decision how to treat the people. You are taking the decision how you treat the people, and this is where it becomes when you become bad, if you actually press the button to abuse these people. Whereas his idea was that actually most people will think that just turning people into servants will be the worst thing. And when we were thinking about why we have different opinions here, we came to the conclusion that I as a person, I have background in classics, so in classical philology, ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and there, like, servitude or slavery was something that was normal. And slaves in the ancient world, some of them had really bad life, but some of them had really good life, right? And they were slaves who were serving important city function, and they were slaves who lived like way better than some of us probably today, right? So the fact that there existed slavery wasn't a problem. A problem was when the master of the slave decided to decided to abuse them or use them for work that was very harsh. So whereas the other option about making more servants in the city. No, wait. I lost my track of thought. Yeah, but what I basically wanted to say that I thought that abusing the work is harsher because of my background. However, for most people, the other option would be harsher because we tend to associate slavery more with the situation that we had in America, which looked different than the situation in the ancient world. And the takeaway from here, is that whenever you're designing, whenever you are assigning sentiment values, you may have a personal backstory and you may have personal factors that change your evaluation of this choice, but you always have to think like what will be the score for the majority of your target audience. So here, to this sentiment factors, apart player's culture and player's character, we can also assign player's personal background. And now we can also update the model by adding these sentiment factors here on the list together with numerical factors. The third group is aesthetic factors. So aesthetic factors are all about how the choice or also difficulty is perceived with senses by the player. So here another Frostpunk 2 example. So in Frostpunk 2 we have the idea of cornerstones. So cornerstones are also a special category of laws that the player can enact when he has pushed his city in a specific ideology far enough, right? So we had a problem. We have a big problem with cornerstones because here automaton primacy is an example of a cornerstone. What it does is basically you can sign it when you have pushed your city enough in the direction of progress ideology, and automaton primacy means that now machines are basically more important than people, and we're putting more focus on that. And if some people die during the work of the machines, well, that's a cost of progress, right? But coming back to it, we had problems with cornerstones because we started by assigning sentiment factors. So we wanted to assign quite high sentiment factors because it was meant to be an extreme thing. And then after that, we said, okay, it has strong negative sentiment factors, so it has to have high positive numerical factors. But we kinda reached a wall. We assigned factors that were at, let's say, a ceiling that were high, but as you can see here, we ended up with a 15, which is not that great for something that is supposed to be like an ultimate in the game. But we couldn't make them any higher, right? Because the first solution would be to make the numerical factors higher, but we couldn't, because Frostpunk 2 is a strategy game. Strategy games are very prone to being broken by OP mechanics. This is the first thing. And the other thing is that although it is a thing that you can sign, this is a law that you can sign when you have pushed your city enough into a direction, it doesn't necessarily happen at the end of the game. So if we had something that breaks the game at the end of the game, that would be okay. But this can happen in the half or in 1/3 of the game. And if we had more than a half of the playthrough broken, that would be a problem. So we assigned sentiment values that we wanted to keep. We didn't want to make them lower. Then we assigned numerical factors that we would like to make higher, but couldn't, right? So fortunately, we have another group called aesthetic factors. So these are the factors, as I said, that relate to perception of the choice with senses. So how things feel, how things see, how things look, how things sound, right? So we did basically 3 main things to make this choice appear appear stronger. So first we added cooler visuals and we changed the flow. So you have seen before this law signing screen, we actually have decided to move this. This is a law, but we decided to move it into the research tree, which we call idea tree in the game. We decided to make it a very specific node that is screaming. I don't know if you can see the animation here. If you don't, it animates. Whoa! Okay, I fell off stage. Come on, like the last time I was presenting, I tripped on the cable. This is okay, but okay. Now we woke up. Okay, yeah. If you ever present, there is a step. Yeah. Okay. So as you can see, it animates. It is also put into a different place. It really screams at the player, "Hey, I'm strong. Click me. I'm important, right?" And we also have a different flow that it doesn't. It's different from other researches that are on this tab, because the things around these are researches which you can just click and start researching, whereas here the flow is you have to click and then you have to press and hold the button so that you really feel the gravitas of this decision of doing something that is very, very strong, very bad, also very irreversible. Right? So these were the two things. And then one thing that we also added was the visual change in the city. This is an effect that happens post factum. So it happens after you have already signed the cornerstone, after you have taken decision, not before. But what we wanted to achieve, we wanted to have this a bit of a wow effect, that you go into the UI screen, you sign the cornerstone, and when you come back, your city looks different. So this is an example. Okay, yeah, sure. So this is an example of the city before, how it looks before signing the cornerstone. This is how it looks after signing automaton primacy. So you can see that all these pipes and lines were added here. I have broken arrows here. Yeah, okay. So imagine that these two boxes are an arrow. And now, so we know that in aesthetic factors, we have visual Okay, something broken here. Okay, we have visual factors and we have feel and flow. So visual, we have this animation, we have the placement, that it looks very important, and feel and flow, that it is in a different place. In a different place, you have to click and hold it. So it feels more important. Water now. I'm running out of time, right? Yeah. Shit. Then I have to talk faster. Okay, then I will be faster. Another example that we have here for aesthetic factors are deaths in Frostpunk 2. So basically, whenever people die in Frostpunk 2, we have this sound cue, which is basically a very low bell. We also have this in Frostpunk 1. You may know this. This goes like more or less like dung dung every time people die. And what made me realize that this has an effect on the perception. Now this has more an effect on perception of a difficulty than the perception of the choice. Here is the disclaimer. But what made me realize it has a impact on the perception of the difficult. What? I'm lost. Yeah, sure. Okay. On the perception difficulty is the fact that first, so this sound was broken so many times during the development. I'm really glad it was broken so many times, because this made me realize how big impact it has on the difficulty. Because every time I played the game when the sound was gone, it not only appeared easier to me, but I also got questions like, "Hey, Kala, did you actually make the game easier last week or something?" And I said, "No, the sound is broken," right? So, so this is another factor that you should take into consideration in this case. In this case, more for difficulty than choices. So we can update our model here. So we left off with numerical and sentiment factors, but we also We also can add aesthetic factors here. And as said previously, aesthetic factors are all about how players perceives their choice with senses. And these can be used to enhance the score if numerical factors fail, and numerical and sentiment factors fail. So I need to wrap up, so I will be wrapping up quick. So the last group is usability factors, and now I will show you an example from multiplayer. This also more pertains to difficulty. So who played Cuphead? That's a lot of people. That's more people than We the Revolution. Okay, wow. At least 15 times more people. So a lot of people played Cuphead. So Cuphead is a run and gun platformer game focused on boss fights. You will always be hitting the enemy located on the right side of the screen. It is also very difficult. As you can see on the screen, it is really busy. Like there are a lot of objects floating in the air. You can't really see where is player, where is projectile, where is enemy, where is something. This is this sometimes gets very confusing. And now Cuphead has 2 modes. So it has single player, which I here assign 0 values because we'll treat it as baseline. So in single player, you have 1 player and you have your base weapon damage. In multiplayer, you have second player who is also shooting, which is great. So it has so we can assign here a lot of additional values, but then the weapon damage of each of the players is halved, right? So it ends up being equal. However, the addition of another player adds more moving elements in the screen, which makes the game way more difficult because you have to consider more things and focus on more things. And also, it is very easy to confuse your player pawn with another player pawn. This is a problem that multiple games. Multiple multiplayer games. Yes, this is what I wanted to say. Struggle with. There is a mechanic. The so-called co-op save that balances this out a bit. So it allows you to save a player. Like you have like a several seconds window. You have several seconds window to save the player who has already died, which can prolong your playthrough. But in my opinion, at least, it doesn't. Okay, yeah, 5 minutes. Yes, it does prolong your playthrough, but in my opinion, it doesn't really compensate. So here as a designer, I would look if I can do something maybe with the numerical values, on the top. Maybe we could tweak the damage to be actually a bit higher, so it compensates to be more or less the same difficulty. And we had a very similar problem in Frostpunk 2. So at the end of the campaign on Frostpunk 2, we have a stage called Faction Wars, which is the epic end of the epic conflict that we face in the game. And we had problem with that because we again started with sentiment and numerical values. So our sentiment values here are quite broad. Now I'm speaking here about difficulty, not choice. This is why I'm just having 1 column instead of 2. So we have here sentiment values, which, as you can see, is a broad bracket between plus 30 and minus 30, because we have their decisions that can be both positive or negative for the player. The player can feel good or bad with themselves about taking them. And at the beginning, we made the balance of the numerical balance quite hard. So I assigned it here minus 50, and here this is the end of the game. It's supposed to be quite difficult, so this value of minus 50 at the end actually is okay. The problem is that if we only had these 2 factors, this would be okay, but we had more, right? So we also had problem with utility factors, and I put minus 100 here because these were like grave problems, right? And we are also at the end of presentation, so I have to scale up my values higher via power creep. So we had problem because we wanted to have a lot of new and custom mechanics in Faction Wars, which means that the player reached the end of the game and suddenly he has to learn new things. Then the onboarding of these new mechanics was meh. The quests weren't very well communicated, so the player had to do new things, but he also didn't know how. And the player also had to focus on problems unrelated to faction war. So, for example, I mentioned that we have multiple cities, in our game, and the player had to manage all of them. So I have the same slides. Okay. So what we did was to balance out this difficulty. We tried to overcome all of these utility issues, but by making the player have to solve less problems and fixing the mechanics or making them simpler where we could. But we also made the balance easier to compensate for the utility factors that we couldn't deal with. So just to wrap up, so what are utility factors? So it is the ease of use. So how easy and how pleasurable it is to use the mechanic or the feature or the choice or the segment of the game. And there is overwhelm, which is how taxing, how much attention it requires to deal with certain factors. So now we can update our model with the last one. As you can see, I have only space for one more thing here. So we can add here our usability factors. And I wrote here utility factors and here usability factors. Okay, whatever, it's exchangeable. So they are all about how easy it is to use a choice or a game player in the given moment. Now to wrap up, choices can be evaluated differently depending on the current game state. This is the first takeaway. Always think about game state and there is typo and and use this to your advantage because choices are interesting when it is not clear which is better than which, and when these evaluations are different in different game states. The other thing is that numerical factors are the absolute basis for balance, but they are perceived differently by players depending on their player comprehension. So players who just started playing the game will take different choices than players who already know the game well. There are 3 additional categories of factors that influence balance: sentiment factors, which are about how the player feels about the decision; aesthetic factors that are all about the senses; and usability factors, which are all about how easy it is to use and how much overwhelm there is. And we usually want to achieve a specific relation between different choices, between the player's evaluation on different choices. And these are basically all the tools that we can use to influence this evaluation. That's it. Thank you.